Persian rug. Originating from the Persian Empire, with over 2,500 years of history, the Persian rug wove its greatness thread by thread, knot by knot, producing pieces that have crossed centuries and still grace the finest spaces in the world. Each region of Iran has its own pattern, its own identity. Tabriz is precise and symmetrical. Isfahan is poetic and floral. Kashan is dense and dramatic. Kerman is soft with color palettes that look like watercolor paintings.
Knots are another key differentiator. Asymmetrical knots are Persian, while symmetrical knots are Turkish. That technical difference defines value. Floral motifs, central medallions, and elaborate borders are the signature hallmarks of Persian rugs. Persian rugs arrived in the United States en masse in the late 19th century when the rising American middle class adopted them as a symbol of status. Today, they remain the most valued rugs at auction. Originating from Anatolia, Turkey, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, the kilim has no pile, no knots. It is pure interlacing, thread over thread, color over color, a flat weave technique that has existed for thousands of years. Every geometric shape carries meaning. Triangles represent protection. Hooks ward off the evil eye. Diamonds symbolize fertility. The nomadic women who wove kilims weren't following a catalog. They were telling stories, recording beliefs, creating wedding gifts meant to last a lifetime. In the United States, the kilim found its moment in the 1970s with the Bohemian movement and a counterculture searching for authenticity beyond industrial production. But it was in the last 2 decades that it truly exploded. Moroccan rugs. For over 2,000 years, the women of the Atlas Mountains and the Sahara Desert have been producing rugs that are at once utilitarian objects and cultural records. The Beni Urain, white with irregular black lines, is the most iconic of them. Chemically untreated wool, a high and dense pile, a texture that feels like a cloud. The Azilal is the colorful cousin of the Beni Urain, coming from the higher mountains with geometric abstractions in earthy tones, reds and yellows. Both carry symbols with spiritual meaning: protection for the home, fertility for the family, memory for the ancestors. These symbols serve a spiritual and narrative function. Every rug tells the story of the woman who made it. Moroccan rugs became a craze in the United States after being embraced by minimalist and modern interior designers. Steve Jobs was obsessed with the Beni Urain, and that alone was enough to catapult American demand. Turkish rug, Anatolian. One of the oldest in the world, the Pazyryk carpet, 5th century BC, is considered the oldest preserved rug ever found. The Ottoman tradition of gifting rugs to sultans and dignitaries as diplomacy meant these pieces were never just decoration. They were messages of power, refinement, and cultural superiority. The Hedeke rugs, produced in the finest silk for Ottoman palaces, are still considered among the most technically perfect in the world. But it was the Uşak that conquered America. With its earthy tones of rust, gold, and ivory, and its large, soft patterns, the Uşak fit perfectly into the aesthetic of late 19th century American mansions. The Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, and Carnegies placed them in their residences as a declaration of arrival among the elite. Indian rugs, Agra and Jaipur. It emerged in the 16th century under the Mughal Empire. Emperor Akbar brought master weavers from Persia to India and established imperial workshops in the cities of Agra and Lahore, where Persian precision fused with Indian exuberance. The result was a tradition entirely its own. The rugs from Agra became famous for their complex and symmetrical floral motifs inspired by Islamic gardens. The idea that paradise is a garden translates literally into every piece. Their richness of color blends classical techniques with contemporary design. The rugs from Jaipur, more recent in tradition, became the center of modern Indian production, balancing artisan craftsmanship with a scale that serves the global market. Afghan rug. produced primarily by the Pashtun and Baluchi peoples of Afghanistan and Pakistan. The most iconic pattern is the ghul, an octagonal medallion that repeats across a red field like a tribal seal. Each tribe has its own ghul, its own variation of the pattern. Looking at an Afghan rug and identifying which tribe made it is like reading a signature. During decades of conflict, weaving was one of the few sources of income that displaced families could maintain. Women wove in refugee camps in Pakistan. The rugs were sold in the bazaars of Peshawar and made their way to dealers in London and New York. After 2001, something shifted in the United States. NGOs like Nest and Aid to Artisans began building direct trade routes between Afghan weavers and American consumers. The Afghan rug gained an extra layer of meaning. Buying one became, in some way, an act of recognition that behind every piece there is a family, a story, a dignity preserved through art. Tibetan rug, a tradition over 1,000 years old, born in the Buddhist monasteries of the Himalayas. In those monasteries, rugs were never merely decoration, they were part of spiritual practice. Dragons, lotus flowers, and clouds were not aesthetic choices, they were visual commandments, Buddhist symbols of protection. The Tibetan weaving technique uses a knot found nowhere else in the world, the Tibetan knot, which creates a cut pile unlike any other tradition. Yak wool, used in the most traditional pieces, is naturally waterproof and extraordinarily resistant to extreme cold. A well-made piece can last centuries. The rug that was born in remote monasteries now shares wall space with contemporary art in New York City penthouses. Navajo rug, Native American. This is the only one on our list born in the Americas, and it changes everything about how we think of rugs. The Diné, the people Americans call Navajo, have inhabited the American Southwest for centuries. Their women developed a vertical loom weaving technique with no knots that produces geometric patterns of remarkable precision in red, black, white, and gray. Each historical phase of Navajo production has its own name: the Classic Period, the Transitional, the Crystal, the Two Gray Hills. Scholars can date a piece within decades just by looking at its palette and pattern. Buying an authentic Navajo rug, rather than an industrial imitation, has become a political act, an acknowledgement that this art has authorship, has history, has a people behind it who deserve both credit and compensation.